There's a woman I want to tell you about. Let's call her Nadia. She's polite. She's competent at her job. She's never been cruel to anyone, never gossiped, never cut a single corner she shouldn't have. And yet, in nearly every group she's ever been part of, a job, a friend circle, a class, there's been at least one person who, almost from day one, seemed to dislike her instantly, intensely, and for reasons Nadia could never actually identify. She spent years assuming this meant something was wrong with her, some flaw she couldn't see, some way she came across that she needed to fix. Carl Jung would tell her something that sounds almost too convenient to be true, except it isn't convenient at all once you really understand it. In a significant number of these cases, the dislike has almost nothing to do with anything Nadia actually did. It has to do with something happening entirely inside the other person, something Nadia simply happened to be standing near when it went off. That's what we're getting into today, and by the end of this video, I think you're going to look back at a specific person who's disliked you and see the whole situation completely differently. But first, here's the part that should genuinely surprise you, because it flips the usual self-help advice on its head. I'm not going to tell you, don't worry what people think of you. That's not actually useful advice, because it's not actually true that what people think of you is irrelevant. What I'm going to show you is something stranger, that the dislike itself can be real, intense, completely genuine on the other person's end, and still have essentially nothing to do with you as an actual person. Both things at once. Stick with me, because this gets stranger before it gets clear. Here's the question I want you holding on to for the rest of this video, and I actually want you answering it in the comments, because I think the answers are going to be more interesting than usual. Think of one specific person who disliked you quickly, intensely, before they really had a chance to know you. Don't tell me who. Just hold the memory. We're coming back to it, and I think you're going to understand it differently by the time we do. Let's start with the actual mechanism, because once you see it, you'll start noticing it everywhere. Jung built an entire framework around something he called the shadow, the parts of yourself that got pushed out of conscious awareness, usually early, usually because they were unacceptable in some way to the people raising you, or to the version of yourself you were trying to become. Anger that wasn't allowed, ambition that got called arrogant, sensitivity that got called weak. None of it disappears. It goes underground, into the unconscious, and it waits. Here's the part that matters for our purposes today. The shadow doesn't just sit there quietly. It looks for places to express itself, and one of its favorite methods is projection, taking the disowned trait and experiencing it not as something inside yourself, but as something you're seeing in someone else. And here's the genuinely strange part, the part that explains so much of what feels like random, undeserved dislike in life. The trait gets projected most strongly onto people who happen to actually display some version of it, even faintly, even completely innocently. So if a man spent his whole childhood being punished for showing ambition, told to be modest, told not to show off, told that wanting things openly was shameful, and he grew up successfully burying that ambition out of conscious awareness, what happens when he meets someone who's simply comfortably ambitious, confident about wanting things, unapologetic about pursuing them? That person hasn't done anything to him. They've simply walked into a room carrying in plain sight the exact thing he spent decades hiding from himself. And something in him reacts, fast, intense, and almost completely involuntary. He doesn't experience this as, I am uncomfortable with my own buried ambition. That thought never even forms. What he experiences is something much simpler and much more convincing from the inside. I don't like this person. The discomfort gets relocated instantly onto someone external, where it's far easier to manage than the alternative, looking directly at the thing he buried in himself decades ago. This is, in a strange way, an efficient system, psychologically speaking. Efficient in the sense that it works, not in the sense that it's healthy. Disliking another person requires almost no internal cost. It's quick, it's socially acceptable, and it doesn't require revisiting anything painful. Confronting your own buried ambition, by contrast, would mean reopening old wounds. The punishment, the shame, the years spent learning to want less, visibly, than you actually wanted. Given the choice between those two paths, the unconscious mind reliably takes the cheaper one. It's not a moral failing. It's closer to a reflex, operating below the level where conscious choice ever gets involved. Here's where this gets genuinely useful, not just interesting. When someone dislikes you because of projection, it doesn't feel diluted or second-hand to them. It feels completely real, completely justified, completely about you specifically. That's what makes it so confusing and so painful to be on the receiving end of. The dislike has all the texture of something earned, something deserved, something you must have done. Nadia, in our opening story, felt this acutely. The dislike she encountered never felt vague or unfocused. It felt sharp, specific, aimed directly at her. But notice something important about how projection actually behaves once you start watching for it. It tends to fixate on details that, examined honestly, are wildly out of proportion to their actual significance. A coworker who can't stand the way you confidently state your opinions in meetings, not because your opinions are wrong, not because you're rude about it, but because something about your visible confidence lands like a slap to a part of them that's never felt safe being that visible. A friend who gets a strange edge in her voice whenever you mention something going well in your life, not because she doesn't want good things for you consciously, but because your good news activates an old buried sense of her own life falling short, and the easiest place for that discomfort to land is on you, the messenger. Here's a scene to make this concrete. Picture a man named Felix, new to a workplace, who simply does his job well, speaks up clearly in meetings when he has something useful to add, and goes home at 5 without apologizing for it. Within his first month, one particular colleague, Renee, has developed a visible coldness toward him that nobody else in the office shares. She makes small comments. She seems to look for reasons his ideas are flawed. Felix assumes reasonably that he's done something to offend her and spends weeks trying to figure out what. He replays specific meetings in his head. Was it the time he disagreed with her proposal, even though he did it politely and she seemed fine in the moment? Was it the project where he got more credit than he expected, even though he never asked for it? He runs through every interaction looking for the moment he must have crossed some line, and he can't find it, because the line was never actually crossed. There simply isn't an incident to locate, no matter how carefully he searches, because the cause was never in the room with them in the first place. What Felix doesn't know, and likely never will, is that Renee spent 15 years in a household and then a career where speaking up clearly got her labeled difficult, where leaving on time got her labeled uncommitted, where she slowly trained herself out of doing either. She did the work of shrinking herself to survive those environments, and some part of her never fully made peace with having done it. Felix isn't reminding her of anything he did. He's reminding her, simply by existing the way he does, of a freedom she gave up. And some part of her resents him for having something she taught herself to surrender. Notice what makes this so hard to untangle from the inside, on either side. Renee isn't consciously thinking, Felix reminds me of the parts of myself I had to bury. If you asked her directly why she didn't like him, she'd probably reach for something specific sounding but ultimately thin. He comes across as a bit arrogant, or something about him just rubs me the wrong way. She believes this explanation completely. It's not a lie. It's simply the conscious mind's best attempt to make sense of a reaction whose actual source it doesn't have access to. Now here's something that's going to complicate this in an interesting way, so don't get too comfortable with the easy version of this idea yet. It would be convenient, flattering even, to walk away from this video thinking, anyone who dislikes me is just projecting their own issues, and I bear no responsibility for any of it. That's not actually what Jung's framework supports, and it's worth being honest about that, because the lazy version of this idea can become its own kind of avoidance. Projection explains a great deal of unexplained dislike. It doesn't explain all of it. Sometimes people dislike you because of something you're actually doing, a real pattern, a real harm, something worth examining honestly, rather than waving away as someone else's shadow material. The genuinely useful skill Jung's work points toward isn't assume it's always them. It's developing the capacity to tell the difference, which requires a kind of honest self-examination most people skip entirely, because both directions, it's all me and it's all them, are easier than the actual case-by-case work of figuring out which parts are which. Here's a rough but useful test. Projected dislike tends to be disproportionate to anything you can actually point to. Intense reactions to small, ordinary things, like confidence, visibility, or simply being comfortable in your own life. Earned dislike tends to track to something specific and nameable, a real instance of you being dismissive, unreliable, or unkind, something you could describe clearly if you were being honest with yourself. The first kind says more about the other person's unprocessed history. The second kind is actually worth sitting with and possibly changing. So if some portion of the dislike you've experienced in life genuinely isn't about anything you did, what's the actual practical use of knowing that? Because it's not about you can become just as much of an excuse to avoid growth as it can become a genuine relief depending on how you use it. Here's where I think it gets useful. Once you understand that intense, fast, disproportionate dislike often signals projection rather than an accurate read on your character, you stop doing the exhausting thing most people do by default, endlessly auditing yourself, replaying interactions, trying to locate the flaw that must be there because someone reacted badly to you. That audit, run constantly, run on every relationship, is its own kind of psychological drain, and very often it's an audit being run in search of evidence that doesn't actually exist, because the actual cause was never inside you to find. But, and this matters, understanding projection doesn't mean becoming someone who shrugs off all feedback as someone else's issue. It means developing a genuinely useful filter. Does this reaction track to something specific and real that I did? Or does it feel intense, fast, and somehow bigger than the actual interaction would justify? The first deserves your attention. The second deserves your compassion for the other person and your own release from a problem that was never actually yours to solve. Here's how that filter actually plays out in real time. Imagine a woman named Bree who notices a friend has gone strangely cold after Bree mentions she got a promotion. Bree's first instinct, the old instinct, would be to immediately scan her own behavior. Did I mention it too much? Did I sound like I was bragging? Should I downplay it next time? That instinct treats the coldness as data about Bree's conduct. But when Bree actually reviews what she said, a single, brief, fairly modest mention, nothing repeated, nothing boastful, she can't find anything that would reasonably justify the change in temperature. The reaction doesn't match the input. That mismatch is exactly the signal worth noticing, not proof that the friend is a bad person, but a sign that something is happening inside the friend that has very little to do with the actual sentence Bree spoke. Picture Nadia again, the woman from the start of this video, years later, having finally understood this. A new coworker takes an instant, inexplicable dislike to her, cold in meetings, dismissive of her ideas, visibly tense whenever Nadia speaks. The old Nadia would have spent weeks auditing herself, trying to locate the offense. The new Nadia notices something different. There's no specific incident she can point to. No actual moment where she was unkind or unreasonable. Just an intensity that arrived almost instantly, before there was anything real to react to. She doesn't ignore the co-worker, doesn't write her off as simply difficult. She stays professional, stays open to actual feedback if it ever comes. But she stops running the exhausting internal audit, searching for a flaw that was never really there to find. That release alone, Jung would say, is most of the actual value in understanding any of this. So, here's the thing underneath everything we've covered, and it's not quite the message the title might have led you to expect. This isn't really a video about how other people's opinions don't matter, or how you should stop caring what anyone thinks. That's not what Jung's work actually supports, and frankly, it's advice nobody can fully follow anyway. What this is actually about is something more specific and, I think, more useful. Learning to tell the difference between a mirror and a verdict. When someone reacts to you with sudden, disproportionate intensity, they are very often showing you something about themselves that they cannot yet see directly. And you, without asking for the job, have become the only available surface for them to see it reflected on. That's not a flaw in you. It's not even really about you, in the sense that matters. You happen to be standing in the spot where someone else's unintegrated shadow needed somewhere to land. The confidence that bothered them was never really about your confidence. The visibility that irritated them was never really about your visibility. It was about a version of confidence, or visibility, or freedom that they buried in themselves long before they ever met you, and you simply had the unfortunate timing of resembling it. Now go back to that person you were holding in mind since the start of this video, the one who disliked you quickly before they really knew you. Think about what it was, specifically, that seemed to bother them. Was it something you actually did to them? Or was it something about how you simply existed, confident, visible, comfortable, successful, whatever it was, that might have had very little to do with you at all, and everything to do with a part of themselves they'd spent years trying not to look at? I genuinely want to know. Tell me in the comments, what was the trait? Confidence, success, ease, something else entirely? You don't have to name the person, just name the thing. I think the comment section is going to be more interesting than usual on this one. If this gave you something to sit with, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.